Welcome back to our Washington, D.C. studio. We're very honored that we're joined in studio by Nabeel Rabjeb, a leading, perhaps the leading Bahrain human rights campaigner. You're here in Washington, D.C. Welcome.
Thank you, brother.
Tell us a little bit about what's going on in Bahrain. Of course, people in the United States are well aware of what happened in Syria, what happened in Libya, what's happened in Egypt. Less in the U.S. media about what's going on in your country.
Well, I mean, this is one reason also I spent some more time in Washington. As you know that I'm here to be awarded by the Wilson Center for the Democracy Award, and I make sure that I stay longer time to change this double standard this double standard policy of United States, to change the media and how they looked at the revolution in Bahrain, and they have different packages towards different revolution. As you know that our revolution was marginalized in the international media in Washington and in Europe due to the relation between the United States from one side and the Gulf countries and the influence of Saudi Arabia in the media and everywhere. This is the main message that I try to deliver in Washington, saying to everyone, politician, congressman, and media, that people fighting for democracy in Tunisia, Egypt, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia, and all around the Arab region. So don't treat those revolutions differently. You should not have different packages for different country. Democracy is democracy, human right is a human right. Doing so, that might make you lose friends around the world. Ignoring people's struggle in Bahrain in a time where tens of people were killed, thousands of people were wounded and arrested and detained and tortured, and houses being raided, that won't leave you a friend in the country. And I think I was able to speak to the media, I was able to speak to the community here, and I think there are more awareness now. But I don't know how much that we're going to have reflection on the politician, and this is what we need to see in the coming days.
Let me go back and ask you about what's happened to you just in the last year. Of course, as a champion of human rights, a campaigner for human rights, someone who is recognized internationally for your role, you've been under a lot of pressure inside your country. And you've been the victim, really, of repression yourself. Just tell me a little bit about what happened to you.
Well, what happened to me is maybe it is an example of what all human rights defenders, activists, unionists, doctors, journalists, bloggers are facing in Bahrain. And maybe it's much less than what they have got. My house has been attacked many times by tear gas, rubber bullet, and sound bomb. And myself, I was pulled out of my bed a few months ago while I was sleeping with my 8-year-old daughter, and beaten and tortured in an unknown place by a 25 masked man who took me out from my home. And that goes on and on and on. But I said, I'm still alive, because many of our colleagues who were struggling for democracy, they were killed. They were tortured. Some of them were paralyzed. Some of them lost their eyes. But thanks God, I'm still lucky. And maybe that's due to the friends I have around the world, due to the affiliation that I have with many international organizations, that I'm still out, not in jail.
And was there any public recognition by the government in Bahrain about what happened to you, for instance? I mean, you're obviously well known, you're in the public eye.
I mean, when the government does not yet admit that they have killed more than 45 people, so you don't imagine that they will admit they have done any kind of harassment or assault or beating me. Thousands of people were wounded, crimes were committed, mosques were demolished. When government does not admit all these crimes, they will not admit that they've harassed me ever.
If there was a genuine democratic transformation in Bahrain, how would it look to you? What kind of a society, what kind of government, what form of government are you looking for?
Well, since I'm a human rights activist, I leave that to the politician who should choose the model of democracy that they're looking for, the model of political system that they're looking for. But for me, is the standard, international standard, it matters: democracy, human rights, social justice. People have to live in their country in equality. Corruption has to have an end. Separation from royal family to the government, and these are the things I think people are looking for. But then again, politicians have to decide, and we have to see at least a political will among the regime, which is missing at this part.
Do you think there's a possibility for reform from within the regime, or does the entire edifice, political structure in Bahrain need to be shifted? Or is it a combination?
Well, they have to deal with the wave of changes in the region, and otherwise they will be wiped from the map. All the regimes in the Middle East, they have to be aware there is a tsunami of change, wave of change coming. People are much aware with the existing of media, social media. People are so much connected. Democrats, people struggling for democracy, today they're more connected around the world. And if those countries are smart, they'll start to reform themselves. If not, then this wave going to wipe them from the map.
The U.S. government, Hillary Clinton now as the Secretary of State, the Obama administration, but in fact almost all administrations, Democrat or Republican, present themselves to the world as the champions of human rights, the defenders of freedom. In the recent months, Hillary Clinton has been taking to the podium here in Washington, D.C. to just say those same words over and over and over again. So I think people are somewhat confused about what accounts for the near silence when it comes to Bahrain, its suppression of peaceful, democratic-oriented demonstrators, the intervention by Saudi Arabia of military forces, a close ally of the United States. From your point of view, what accounts for the seeming disparity between the official position of the United States for human rights and the near silence when it comes to what's going on in your country?
I mean, this is a message I was trying to deliver, that you talk about the human rights, you talk about justice, but that word has to be seen in reality, in practice. As you know, you can see the Saudi influence here, where the Americans were almost quiet when it comes to Bahrain, when in the other revolution they were speaking. And also you see how much the United States were pushing in Syria and Libya, and asking Russians and all not to sell arms to those countries, but at the same time they're trying to sell arms to Bahrain at the time where they were killing their own people, and receiving Saudis in Bahrain to take part in the crackdown. This is the double standard foreign policy that we're complaining of. And we say that will not help the American interest in the long run, not even in the short run. And this is what we're trying to tell the people here.
For our international audience and national audience here in the United States that may not know, what's the specific relationship? What's the military and political and economic connection between the United States government and your country?
Well, there was a historical relation, and we appreciate that relation. We appreciate have relation with everybody around the world. We, from our neighbors to international power, and we are with that. Now they have the American base in Bahrain, and been there for the past 60 years. I think one of the main reasons why we have fears among the administration is that if there is democracy in Bahrain, their Fifth Fleet might ask to leave the country. And that's where the fear comes, and you see they have more support for the regime than the democratic movement in Bahrain.
So it's the primacy of geostrategic, or in this case, the military relationship with the Fifth Fleet, that may be trumping any presumed defense of human rights.
I think this is the case on Bahrain and in the Gulf. It is the Navy, it's the Sixth Fleet, it is who are taking the decision, who are deciding the type of relation that should be with the Gulf country, and not the State Department or the administration. I can see the influence of the Navy here much stronger than the politician when it comes to Bahrain and Saudi. That's why you say yes, their interest, their presence has more priority than human rights in this part of the world.
The human rights work that you've been doing for more than a decade, well more than a decade, isn't simply about the democracy or change of government. It's also about the treatment of people. I noticed that you were campaigning for the rights of migrant workers, for instance. Can you talk a little bit about what the situation is for migrant workers in Bahrain?
Yes, as you know that Bahrain and the Gulf country are a host country to millions of migrant workers who come from East Asia. And mostly those migrant workers are treated in a bad condition, living in a places, working in a places that does not meet international standard. In many countries are treated like slaves. And we think it's a time now that the situation of those migrant workers in the region need to be improved. Those people have to be, deal with equally as we dealing with our own citizens. You cannot isolate them. You cannot treat them away from the international standard. And it's a process going on by the international movement, by the local human rights movement. And let's hope that things get better in the coming years.
You mentioned that that all the Gulf states have a situation with migrant workers and the sort of humiliation and bad treatment and low social status. There seems to be, and I want you to talk about this a little bit more, sort of a network there of states that are monarchies, that are supporting each other, that are integrated. Saudi Arabia seems to be, in some way, the anchor of that. What is the Saudi government fearing most in Bahrain? They sent troops to Bahrain and suppressed the peaceful demonstrators, even while they're condemning other Arab countries for not listening to their own people.
Well, that is, it's more politics than it is a human right. Supporting the revolt, revolutionaries in Syria and Libya, it was more political due to their relation with Syrian regime and Libyan more than about human right. And as you know that we are living in a region ruled by families since past many years. And many of those families believe and they think those countries are their own companies or their own farms, and in that basis they are dealing with and they don't, they fears from democracy and struggle of people for social justice. I think Iraq is becoming or in a process to be a very fully democratic state was frightening to the Gulf countries, mainly Saudi Arabia, and that's why there were resistance for Iraq to be democratic. And now again, in Bahrain, people are struggling for democracy, which means if that happens, that will be democracy arriving to the border of Saudi Arabia, and the other border of Iraq is another democracy. And of course, democracy in Bahrain is going to have an impact on the Saudi nation and Saudi people who will also start struggling. So this is a resistance by the Gulf countries, mainly Saudi Arabia, maybe United Arab Emirates, to any movement, to any struggle of those people who are fighting for democracy. But I think the change is coming, whether they want it or they don't want it. The change is coming. If they don't adopt the new situation of the people in our countries, and there'll be a time those people struggling in the ground, they will think that we can't deal anymore with those systems and we're going to remove them. So that's why my always suggestion, deal with them. Deal with those people fighting for democracy. You better come out with a solution that save you blood of your own people, and compromise and come out with conclusion, come out with model that you could stay in your power, but at the same time you have to share power with the people, and that's what they are resisting till now.
I want to get your opinion about, again, not because of the Obama administration, but in terms of the long, big picture of U.S. relations in the region. There was the revolution in Iran in 1979 that toppled the Shah, who had been for 26 years a client of the United States. That really, changed the political alignment. Shortly after that, when he came into office, Ronald Reagan said, there will be no revolution in Saudi Arabia. In other words, the American government in Washington, D.C., thousands of miles away, could make a pronouncement that they wouldn't let there be another revolution against a country whose government had functioned as an ally or as a proxy. Is it sort of scripted into the U.S. foreign policy that the U.S. will do everything in its power to maintain the Saudi government, in spite of its absence of human rights?
I don't think this how the Americans will, once people raise and fight for democracy, I don't think any country will be able to resist that, and it will be embarrassing to the international community if any country do that. And I think it's time for Americans to think now that that those countries cannot run anymore as they were for the past 100 years, and they should advise those dictators in the region that please change and reform yourself faster than wipe you off. And that's the best thing. And I don't think anybody will resist any revolution from the United States government. And I think there are discussions now going on in Washington, the benefit of having a strong relation with repressive regime like that at the time, where people rising up every country calling for democracy and human rights. And I think it's a positive discussion, and I hope that it will come into a conclusion that strengthening relation with dictators will not help the long strategic interests of United States.
The Saudi royal family seems not only to have a great resource, perhaps the largest possessor of oil in the Middle East. They've had a kind of relationship with the United States where, in spite of their terrible their performance on democratic rights and human rights and women's rights, it's never really a point of marginalization in the relationship. They're not attacked, they're not demonized. And I'm wondering if you can tell our audience whether you feel that there are the forces within Saudi society, as there were, say, in Egypt or Tunisia or in your own country, that would spark, in spite of the repression, a same kind of people's uprising. Is it possible?
First of all, you have to know, Saudi and the Gulf countries, they have more PR companies in Washington than anybody else. And those PR companies doing a hell of work to strengthen the relation between those sheikhs and emirs and kings with the politician here. But the reality is that about the revolution, 2 years ago, nobody thought that ever Tunisia, with this police state, with this dictator, will rise up and fight for democracy. Nobody have suggested, nobody have believed that Egyptian will come out in the street on 25th of January and fight for democracy, as we have seen waves and thousands and millions of people in the street. And they removed the best ally of United States. And nobody will believe that Saudi, one day, you will see waves of millions of people in the street, and as you will see them in all the Gulf countries calling for democracy and social justice. It's a situation that is going to come. Deal with it. If you don't deal with it, you are going to be in a problem.
You talked a little bit about Iraq. The United States just has announced, after it was unable to immunize its troops for a longer-term occupation, that they would leave, and that they are leaving. But the embassy in downtown Baghdad of the U.S. is the largest ever, largest in the world, in spite of the fact that Iraq is a relatively small country. Do you feel that the U.S. is got a permanent sort of military presence, or is attempting to have a permanent military presence in Iraq, and if so, why?
Well, in fact, I mean, it's not my maybe cup of tea to talk about the relation between the Iraqis and the Americans, but I think it's smart of the Iraqis to have a good relation with everybody, have a good relation with the United States, have good relation with China, with Russia, with Iran, with Saudi Arabia. and to look into their own internal situation and how to improve democracy, how to make people feel they are living in equality and justice. That's the main, I think, priority Iraqi government has to take into consideration with keeping good relation with everybody.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now let's go back to Bahrain and where you see the movement going right now. A lot of people have been imprisoned. There were reports that those arrests were illegal, that they weren't accorded due process. You would have thought perhaps that they were going to be released. Are they being released?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that after the report of Bassiouni were released, everybody thought next day that prisoners will be released, and based on what the conclusion of the report saying that those were illegal, people were tried in a court that does not meet international standard, does not meet the Bahraini laws and constitution. We thought they're going to be released, but in the ground nothing has changed. People were not released. Excessive use of force is still used by the security apparatus. More people being arrested, more people being tortured. Nothing has changed in the ground.
You know, the American people are going through their own sort of big economic crisis. There are tens of millions who are unemployed. There's big budget deficits. We spend almost $700 billion for war. We have military installations all over the place, including in Bahrain. And a lot of people here are saying, why do we have this huge military network everywhere? Bahrain and the people in the Middle East are not about to attack us. From your point of view, is that a problem for the Bahrain process of democratic rights and human rights to have such a big military presence? Should the Americans stay in Bahrain or should they leave?
Well, I think that is up to both parties, but I don't think military violence, killing tanks will solve any political crisis or any political dispute. And I think always with peaceful means, friendship, tolerance, accepting the others, it's the way to have a strong position around the world and to be more influential. And I wish one day that more money are spent in poor countries in Africa and Asia to help those nations and to get them to be Euro-friend, which is, I think, to me, is much better than sending an army to this country and that country.
Tell us, if you can, as an insider in the sense that you're right there in Bahrain, what do you or how do you view the function of the U.S. Navy? What is it doing there?
Well, unfortunately, I don't know what they're doing there, but I know they have a base. I don't know how many people are there. They are in a small area called Jufair, but I'm the last person to know what they're doing there.
Yeah, I didn't mean an insider in a military sense. I meant just, do the people in Bahrain, are they well aware of the base? Are they aware of the relationship?
They were there for the past many years, and they're close to a village called Jufair, and people are living with them, and they have their own places and houses. They are not interfering in inside issues in politics, and that's why people got nothing to do with them.
Yeah, I guess what I'm asking is that in many places around the world, like in the Philippines, the U.S. had the Clark Air Base, big naval base and an air base, and it became a movement of the people to reclaim sovereignty by having foreign military bases sort of leave their country. That became a dynamic force in the human rights campaign against the Marcos dictatorship. I'm just wondering, is there a similar kind of situation in Bahrain? Do people feel that that's...
No, there are different people. There are people who think they are helping the economy by having renting houses, using restaurants, and many of them. And there are people who think no army should be here, and even Bahraini government should not spend much money on the army and disarming themselves. But there is no one opinion about it, and it's not an issue now going on among people.
What's the best way for you to shine a light on the situation in Bahrain with human rights or the negation of human rights? And is there a way, in spite of the fact that it's been marginalized, perhaps because the Gulf states have big PR firms here, like Saudi Arabia, perhaps because the U.S. government has a double standard, is there something that you think is most important in terms of revealing the situation in Bahrain to the world?
I think the situation in Bahrain is known by the international community, and the human rights organizations have covered it very well. But then you have again the problem of Western government who have a good relation with the Bahraini and the Saudi government. But this is a process, it's campaign that we are in it, and more media, more and more people, more and more member of parliaments around the world are tackling and talking about the problem. Now you see also that the European Parliament have issued a statement on Bahrain last month, which is a progressive thing, and that shows that people have realized that there is something wrong going on in that part of the world, and they should avoid it. And I think there are more awareness now than before.
Are people in Bahrain right now watching with sort of the kind of a trained, focused attention on the events in Egypt, and do they see the events in Egypt as having some sort of decisive impact on those in the Gulf states as well, or is that too far away?
No doubt about it, that has impact in Bahrain. Tunisia, when it started, have impact, and when it started in Egypt. And it is a movement supporting each other, empowering each other. And of course, there are impact from each revolution to the other one.
Let me ask you a final question. Where are you going from here? Where's your movement going from here right now, just in a few seconds?
Continuous struggle till we achieve our goal that we have come out in 14th of February fighting for democracy, freedom, and social justice.
Okay, Nabeel Rabjeb, thank you very much. It was a great pleasure and a great honor to meet you. That does it for this week. Thanks.